This video is for education and entertainment purposes only. Please consult with your healthcare provider before making any changes to your health plan.
Go. Yay!
Okay. Let me
We
make sure
figured it out.
in a view where you can see me, hear me, everything's good.
Yep, I hear you perfectly well. Yes. Yay, and people are slowly trickling in. Awesome. So, hi everyone. I am Jaclyn. I'm going to introduce Celina, who is joining us today for our little 1-hour chat on lichen sclerosus, sex, and intimacy. We did get folks to submit questions in advance, so thank you so much for submitting your questions, and we're kind of going to work through that together. So yeah, Celina, why don't you introduce yourself?
Hi, good morning, good afternoon. I'm over in California, so it's still morning for me. My name is Celina Combs. My pronouns are she, her, and I am a divorce doula, certified sex educator, mom of 2, and person who's been living with lichen sclerosus, diagnosed about 20 years ago. So
wow, I forgot it was that long ago.
yeah, I was pretty young, and it's really interesting because I was actually diagnosed pretty young with a biopsy and all in my early 20s.
Oof.
But I had been living with the symptoms for a long time before that. So even in my teen years, but of course, no, as a 14-year-old, I wasn't talking to anybody about lesions on my vulva.
No, of course not. I probably wouldn't have even known. Right. I was just going to say, or even known those terms. I know I certainly didn't know any of those terms at that age. All I was able to say was like itch or pain there.
Right. And I had constant itch, just frequent pain. And my first signs of now what I know is lichen sclerosus was I was getting lots of tears and cuts where I would say I have cuts there, and tell my mom I have cuts at the top, and I wasn't knowing I had cuts on the clitoral hood. I just could know. I'm like, there's cuts at the top. Am I going to rip all the way up to, my belly button one day? Just these kind of, dry, scaly, some white patches, but had no idea. And just at that time, thought I must be doing something to myself. I was all my life, pretty consistent masturbating queen.
I love that. And we're going to talk about masturbation a lot this morning.
I know we're like going past intros, but I think that it's important to say as kind of my introduction that before I knew I had lichen sclerosus, I probably, like a lot of people, thought I am doing something wrong, or these like bad thoughts about my body is mad at me. I am, kind of in this culture of like, I'm giving myself pleasure, so I must be being punished for it kind of thing, which is not true. And now that is my passion and career, is making sure people don't feel that way. And
I absolutely love that.
What we can do about it. So
that's fantastic. And I think that that's very common for folks with lichen sclerosus to have that tendency to blame themselves if something goes wrong. I definitely have also had feelings where I thought I was being punished, because I too would get a lot of the cuts and stuff. And so there was thought about like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe this is wrong, even though I wasn't raised that way. But, that was kind of where I go. So I think I know that a lot of people struggle with blame and pleasure and all of that. So I think that's absolutely fantastic. And I'm so glad that you joined us today, because I think you bring a really unique perspective and can really help with some of these amazing questions that we got.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. We got amazing questions. Your followers are fantastic. And you have so many good answers for them. So I know that they trust you. So I'm glad that I can be here in that trusting space as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much. All right. So let's just dive into some of these questions.
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm going to start with one of the more medically based questions, because I think it will kind of set the stage for some of the other questions to follow. So one of the first questions was, how does LS impact how does lichen sclerosus impact sexual function, pleasure, and libido? So I'm going to do like a really Cole's Notes version of this. So lichen sclerosus is a chronic inflammatory skin disease. It's considered to be autoimmune, and what Dr. Krapp and Dr. Goldstein at the Centers for Vulvovaginal Disorders believe is that there exists a protein or a collection of proteins in the basement layer of our vulvar skin. Now, when our body recognizes this protein, it identifies it as not self. Now, as many folks with autoimmune conditions know, when the body identifies something as not self, it's kind of seen as an intruder that poses a threat to the body. So the body reacts in a way to eliminate that. And in the case of lichen sclerosus, that's a very localized, very strong inflammatory response. And that inflammatory response is responsible for things that will create your skin changes. So essentially the skin becomes hardened, and that consequently will lead to different changes in the skin texture and how your vulva looks. So for this topic of sex and intimacy, this is really important because the vulvar anatomy can change. This means that the skin will become thickened and it can become tacky and it can kind of stick together. And when it sticks together, that's what we call fusing. So pieces of your labia, your labia your labia minora can fuse to the labia majora, the clitoral hood can fuse over the glands. There's, all of these kind of structural changes can occur because of this inflammatory response. And this has a direct impact on sexual function. So for example, if you have fusing at the entrance of the vagina, then that could be difficult to insert either a penis or an insertable into the vagina. It can also be extremely painful because there's not enough space to accommodate for the space of whatever is trying to be inserted inside. And then there's also tearing that can come with that because that thickened, hardened skin doesn't have the elasticity that non-LS skin has. So it can't kind of stretch to accommodate for what's coming in. So that is one way that it impacts sexual function. And then another way is that you can get fusing of the clitoral hood over the glands, and that can be either partial or complete. And what can happen there is that when you have some of that fusing, it can lead to decreased sensation, muted orgasms, and in the case where some folks have full, complete fusing of the hood over the glands, they might completely lose the ability to have any sensation or orgasm. And then all of this, as we would probably figure, is going to have a pretty strong, emotional impact. And it's also going to really affect our libido, right? I mean, your libido is probably not going to be sky high if penetration is that painful, or if you get no pleasure because you have no sensation. So it's normal for there to be emotional consequences to this, and also this decrease in your libido. And I know that when I talk to a lot of folks with lichen sclerosus, low libido is definitely a big concern for folks. So another kind of sub question on the medical question was, how common is clitoral fusing in women, and what can be done to prevent it if white patches start to show up there? So I haven't, to date, I haven't come across any studies that cite any kind of statistics of percentage of folks that have that kind of fusing. So it doesn't seem like we have a strong number there, but I would say from lived experience in speaking with folks with lichen sclerosus, I think it's pretty common to have at least some degree of fusing around the clitoral area. I haven't heard so many cases of a full, a complete fusion, but I think a lot of folks definitely have at least some fusing. And I do think it's important to note, especially for any new listeners, that just because you have fusing doesn't necessarily entail that you're going to lose sensation. So I happen to have quite a lot of fusing with the hood to the glands, quite a significant amount. So I can't retract my hood or anything like that. But nonetheless, I still have sensation there and I'm still able to orgasm. So when I say this, I just want to be super clear that it doesn't mean that you will necessarily lose sensation. And another part of this was what can be done to prevent it. So again, I'm going to keep this really brief because this is more of a treatment question, but it is important to address. And if you want a longer, more in-depth explanation on what you can do to kind of prevent fusing from happening and, you know, get the white patches under control, you can download my free ebook that I have at www.lostlabia.com/ebook. And if you haven't already, and I'm sure you have, but if you haven't, you have to listen to Lichen Sclerosus podcast interview with Dr. Jill Krapf. She really goes over, you know, treatment, how to treat properly and consistently. There's just loads of great information because ultimately what it's going to come down to is controlling the inflammation. The inflammation is what's causing the symptoms. The inflammation is what is causing those textural skin changes. So if we can control the inflammation, then we can control the disease. So you really want to be choosing a treatment plan that does have, you know, a component that addresses the inflammation. So again, I would check out those resources. And I'm happy to chat via DM if people want to, you know, kind of take a deeper dive into that. But those are the resources I would suggest for that. And then the final kind of medical opening question had to do with nerve damage and the clitoris. So like the person asked, does lichen sclerosus cause nerve damage to the clitoris? So our clitoris has a ton of nerve endings, like over 8,000. It's pretty wild that it has that many nerve endings. And those nerve endings are extremely sensitive and receptive to stimuli, so to things like touch and stuff like that. Now, what I'm going to kind of draw on here, I really like Dr. Rachel Rubin is a urologist, and she has this amazing analogy that I'm going to kind of borrow to kind of illustrate what's going on with the clitoris and lichen sclerosus and pleasure. So, and she doesn't discuss it in this context, but I think it lends well to this conversation. So Dr. Rubin says, you know, if you take your hand and you just gently rub the inside of your thigh, let's say, or your kneecap, are you going to have an orgasm? I mean, you might, but probably not. And the reason you probably will not is because you're not really coming into contact with any of those nerve endings in the clitoris. Whereas if you were stimulating and touching or rubbing an area where those nerves are, then you're more likely to orgasm or to at least experience a pleasurable sensation. So now something similar happens with this thigh rubbing with lichen sclerosus, because we can basically see that thigh as what's happening to our clitoris. So our clitoris, the glands, that super sensitive glands, is getting covered over by thickened, hardened skin. So that's kind of creating a barrier. It kind of mutes the sensation of the nerve, so they're not getting the same, you know, percentage, I guess. You know, if a healthy nerve would feel like 100%, well, this is muted. So in some folks, it might be 80%, 60% or less. So that's kind of what's going on with the nerves in the clitoris. And that's why some folks do notice a decrease of sensation, because that thickened, hardened skin is kind of creating a barrier so that those nerves aren't getting the full signal. And again, this will impact your ability to feel pleasure and orgasm. And that, of course, is going to have a huge impact on your mental health and on your libido. So that's the kind of main medical questions. I think there's a couple others sprinkled in there, but I think that kind of sets the stage well, because what we're discussing is intimacy, pleasure, and lichen sclerosus. And here we're kind of seeing that there are some barriers, challenges that kind of cause us to kind of think outside the box of what pleasure means and what intimacy means and how we can kind of reclaim those while living with lichen sclerosus. So kind of moving in from that, one person said, how can I come back from a setback that happens during penetration and the feeling of hopelessness that happens afterwards? So Celina, do you want to take that one?
Sure. So I want to do, sorry, let me make sure I'm in the screen properly.
No worries.
I think in my introduction, I did say that I'm a divorce doula. So I didn't want that to make, I wanted the assumption there is I am a divorced person. So a lot of my experience with this particular matter question occurred during marriage, right? Which I've not been in now for 5 years. And so, Jaclyn, what you and I have talked about too in the past is that so much about living with LS is about communication with whatever partners we have. And
Yeah.
so thinking about coming back from, you know, a setback, I think I want to make sure I'm saying, you know, they described it as a setback. I keep thinking about what happened before that. So what communication is happening before that? And I know it's hard to say, you're so tempted to say it's going to be different for every situation and every person. And it really is. It really is. Because I'm thinking right now about the communication I had with a married partner that was not supportive. I'm thinking about communication I have with, there's a lot of feedback on
yeah, there's a lot of feedback is what people are
I can
saying.
hear it too. I wonder, should I?
Do you have headphones in?
I don't, and that's the problem. I also
Maybe headphones could help.
my headphones. I can blame them while they're not here, right? That's so wrong.
Yeah, of course you can.
I didn't have the feedback before. Should I turn off volume on one of your devices, as a friend is saying? Does that work now? No.
It seemed to actually, or maybe that was just too small of a sentence.
Do you think? Oh, it's working.
I think so. I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry, everyone. I could step off and try to come back. It wasn't echoing before.
No, it wasn't, which is strange.
Yeah. Well, let's try. I think it's.
Yeah.
I can hear the feedback right now, so let's keep trying.
Yeah, people are saying it's better. So.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. What I was saying too is that the difference between what partners you have too, and how comfortable we are with what we disclose. It's, you know, this belongs to us, and it's something that we want our partners to understand as much as we want them to understand for what we need them to understand it for, right? That's a lot of words, but saying that there is a difference between, you know, when I was with a married partner who was not supportive, and when I have some consistent sex partners that are actually, you know, they're really there to make sure that we're both having pleasure. And so all the communication is about how we give each other pleasure, what's going on, if there's any challenges for them or for me. And so it's a lot of this. I know I'm backing up before this question actually like presents itself, but it's a lot of communication before and what we feel comfortable with. And that's when we think about setbacks, a lot of the setback is obviously, like you said, that cycle of if we have pain, it's going to affect our mental and our, you know, mental and emotional feelings about our bodies. It's going to affect our libido. And so where sometimes, that's what I'm saying, there's so much involved in this question.
I know, actually, my brain is spinning right now.
My head is spinning, but because I want to take it from two parts, where I'm really thinking, you know, the setback could really feel for me, right? I wanted penetration. It hurt too much. We couldn't do it. The mood felt ruined. Now I'm in my head about my body ruined this experience for myself and my partner, right? Mm-hmm. I'm just speaking from experience. My setback there is then, I don't know that we're going to be like, when are we going to be able to do this? What are they thinking about me? This and this and that. So there's like one side of things. The other side is maybe thinking so much about the setback in relation to the partner, like getting so in your head about what they wanted and what maybe they could not do, what they could not complete. And this is where I want to say that, like, this is my world here, because this is where I'm saying, you know, but maybe the conversation is about when you have this setback, you want to come back from it. You know, I like debriefing after sex anyway, no matter what.
Yeah, I agree.
Then we know whether we have LS or not, whether we're experiencing a flare up, whatever's going on. I like a good debriefing just to know what feels good, what you like, what I like, what we can do again, what we want to try. So I feel like taking some time and then knowing we're going to debrief, like already having that as part of your partnership.
Yeah.
Knowing we're going to debrief so that it doesn't feel awkward later on to say, hey, this didn't work out the way I wanted. Oh, I want to talk about it. But just debriefing already built into the sexual relationship. And then I think what I ended up finding too was that when I'm doing that debriefing, when I'm feeling this setback, what I find out with a supportive person is that their main goal was to give me pleasure.
Right.
If we're disappointed, it's because that didn't happen. Not necessarily because it didn't happen in this particular way, right? And then let's also make room for that, though. Let's keep it real and be honest. I wanted to talk about all these different things we can do to different parts of our bodies to feel pleasure. But let's keep it real. There are times where we just want what we want. We want clitoral stimulation, or we want good oral that doesn't feel awkward and uncomfortable. We want penetration that is not painful. And it does feel really frustrating when that doesn't happen. In a way, there's part of this answer is a lot of empathy, because sometimes it's not going to work because we can say no when something doesn't feel good. But I think building in that debriefing is going to really help you come back from a setback, and then also building in, debriefing and aftercare. So even if the actual goal, your presumed goal of what you wanted in that experience, that stimulation, didn't come to fruition, aftercare can happen after whatever didn't feel right. So I like to, there's been times, I'm even thinking very recently, I had a flare up, and it was, I get flare ups because of UTIs.
Mm-hmm.
If one thing's attacking me, then my skin is going to go. And I had this flare up, and even though I really like, manual touch and fingering and that sort of thing, it felt just like, I just was like, this is too much. It's too much stimulation. I had to back off, let the person know, and do that debriefing moment. But then also, I asked for aftercare, even though I didn't orgasm, and I said, I would feel really good right now if we could cuddle, if you could rub some other part of my body. I really rub my butt, please, rub my thighs. And then I said, I use this solve after sex. Would you can I show you how I put it on? And maybe you could put it on me and we can have that kind of touch.
Mm-hmm.
So there's part of me that wants to say feel the setback because it's real. And I want to be empathetic towards that. We don't have to pretend that it doesn't suck.
Yeah, 100%, because it does.
Yeah. And then there's also really, as much as we can, if we have somebody that's supportive there, understand that what they probably wanted was to feel pleasure themselves, sure. But for you to feel pleasure, and not necessarily in just one way, so that's, you can move forward from that.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful and also very realistic response to what a lot of us go through. Feel your feelings. It's okay to feel upset about this. It's okay to even frame it as a setback. You're allowed to have those feelings, and it is extremely frustrating to live with this and to have these these experiences. They really are heavy, and I think it is important to feel them and to process them. And I think when we talk about processing, that's where I love the piece about having communication before and after kind of comes in. So you can have discussions afterwards about these, because I find hopelessness often comes from a place of feeling alone.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing else here. There's no more hope. And so I feel that, there's a lot of spiraling that can happen inside the head alone afterwards if you're not communicating that with the other person. And sometimes it's okay to have a good cry with your person afterwards. Yeah. Cry and be like, I'm frustrated that it's not working. I'm frustrated, I'm attracted to you. Why can't I get wet on my own? Why do I have to use lube? All of these things, and just be real with each other and let that raw emotion kind of come out. And then again, with the aftercare piece, I think that's beautiful, because that again is giving us an opportunity to kind of reconnect again and kind of foster a form of intimacy. So even if you didn't have the kind of intimacy that you were hoping for while you were having sex, there's still some intimacy afterwards, right? With the cuddling, with playing with the hair, maybe having a nice meal in bed, whatever it is that is your comfort food, having that. Maybe they'll bring you some tea, or you take a bath together, like whatever it is, but do something to kind of be in the moment with that person and show them, you know, affection. So I think that can be really, really helpful and kind of not, you know, take away the feeling of hopelessness, but maybe bring it down a little bit.
Absolutely. And, you know, and as we're talking about this, something that I just want to just kind of say again, because I feel like in different forums and just when I talk with folks, like what's hard for me is that I do not have a, you know, I haven't had a like partnered, I'm not like a coupled person. And so this means I'm going to maybe have this conversation so many different times with so many different people. It's not somebody who's going to be consistent and like really learn my body for the next 2 years. Like I'm talking, you know, like new people, and that's my choice. And I'm like, I'm happy about it. But I think it's like really good to say that too, that like some of us have this experience of like, we're with a partner that we're coupled with, or partners that we're coupled with, and we're going to have these kind of interactions. And then there's some of us who are like, maybe I don't even want to go home with this person because this is going to be a lot to have to do, you know? And I'll say there's been experiences where I've had that going on where I'm like, I really want to hook up with this person. I know I'm like a little itchy and I know why. And so what I've done, and I think that COVID has actually really helped with this, because we're doing constant health checks with people. Right? Where we're having these conversations, you know, like, oh, when were you last tested for COVID? Or like, do you have, you know, we have to answer like, do you have a cough? Do you have a this, you know? And we disclose. And I think it's really helped me to have some open like just matter of fact conversations about my vulva health. So, you know, it's like the same way I would tell somebody, you know, well, I actually have a little sore throat. So letting you know, and this is how it's going to make me feel about blah, blah, blah. You know, I'd rather just hang out and hold hands, or I want to do this. I've had an experience where, you know, I've gone on a couple dates with somebody and I'm a little itchy there, and I'm like, I feel like this is a time where we might do some under the clothes touching, and I would like that. So I'm just going to let them know about my current health right now, you know? So it's like kind of all put into like, right now I know that I'm testing negative for COVID, but I'm a little itchy in my vulva and I use this salve on it. And so you might feel that when you touch me, if you feel okay about that. And need soft touches. Do you still want to do this? But sandwiched in with all the other health stuff that we're like being so common about, it feels easier to me. It feels a little easier to have conversations and really treat like this is not a secret part of our body. You know, we're taught like it's private, but it's not a secret that it exists. Same way, if you have if you have an earache, I don't want to say no one, but it's not so common for people to get this stigma about like, you know, please don't speak too loudly because my ear hurts, and nobody's going to look at you and go, that is just, why did you talk about that? You know? So I like to try and do the same. Like, hey, you want to spend some time with my vulva? That's cool. So it's not a secret, it exists. So let me tell you what's going on, you know, and kind of try to frame it that way.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's really important because it kind of just helps to further normalize vulvar health in general, because we are so open, you know, oh, I have strep throat. Maybe I'll stay home tonight. No one ever bats an eyelash for that.
Right.
But God forbid I tell you about my vulva. Like, and so I think in having these conversations, and it's hard at first, it takes, you know, it does get easier in time when you have these conversations and it starts to feel more normal and healthy. And it just becomes a part of the conversation in the same way that I would be, you know, saying if I had an STI, you know, I want to inform my potential partner about it so that they can make an informed decision for them. And we can have a conversation about how we can proceed and needs and all of that. You know, same thing for lichen sclerosus or anything like that. So I love the kind of normalizing of vulvar health that comes in with these conversations. And again, yeah, it gets easier in time for
Yeah,
sure.
I was gonna say, I don't want to make it sound like this is a piece of cake, but sometimes for me, it's practice too. It's like, who was hard to talk about this with? My friends, and I got a question that I didn't bring up to you, but I had a friend that actually responded and said their question, they do not have lichen sclerosis, but their question was, what can I do for my friend? How can I be a support? What do I need to know? And that's huge, because really I'm like, oh my gosh, I just want to know that you're a friend that can listen to me vent about it one day, if or let me practice talking about it. Like, let me practice disclosing it with you as if you're going to be a partner. Like, can we play that out? Can I give you some lines to give me? And
that's a great idea.
Awesome. With a very trusted person who is not judging, who just is like, I'm your friend and I want to be there for you. I'm like, oh my gosh, can I practice telling you that I've got a lesion right now, and to practice what I want to do instead? Having a friend ask me that question is like huge. It's amazing.
I love when people ask that question, or any kind of like, how can I better support this person with LS? My heart like melts every single time. I'm like, man, like if you only knew how much just asking that question meant, the fact that you are going out of your way to try and learn about what I'm living with, the fact that you want to know how to be a better support person, like that's just, I love folks like that. That's awesome. And I love this idea of kind of doing like a mini kind of role play of the situation. I think that's a great space to safely practice how you would want to say it and how does it feel when I say it. So I love that. And that's great advice.
Maybe we can set that up. We'll have to talk about that offline. Maybe we
can set up some, I like this idea.
Yeah, helping, kind of being there and practicing that.
Because I think that would feel a lot more of like a safe step. Like it just seems like going from 0 to 100. If you've never been one to kind of communicate your needs, or if you've never told anybody about LS, well then telling potential partners or your partner or partners about it, like that can just seem like too much. Like, nope, I'm not ready. Like my anxiety is just too high. But I think if you have these kind of intermediary steps where you have a safe space to practice that, that could be really, really helpful for a lot of folks. So yes, we will definitely follow up on this one. Okay, so we definitely got a lot of questions about how to prepare for penetrative sex with lichen sclerosus and how to avoid tearing. So I do have a tip. Well, I have a couple tips for avoiding tearing with sex, and then we can kind of speak more generally about things that can help prepare for sex. Or penetrative sex is the question specifically, so for penetration. So for tearing, some advice that I have is if you want to be sexually active and you're worried about tearing, if you know where you tend to tear, so common places to tear, the perineum and then around the top, so like that clitoral area. So obviously we always say use lube, and we're definitely going to talk about lube in a bit, but yes, definitely use lube. And use a generous amount. But one thing that I found a really helpful tip is to actually put a barrier cream on the area that you tear first and then lube. So for anyone listening that is unfamiliar with the term barrier cream, it's usually just a very thick kind of ointment. So think like Vaseline, Aquaphor, something like that. It's very, very thick. And it basically creates a barrier between your skin and anything else that's going to come into contact with it. So creating that barrier kind of creates an extra layer of protection. So you would put, let's just use Vaseline for this example, and you tear on the perineum area. So you would put Vaseline on the perineum area, and then you would still put lube over top. So it's just kind of creating like an extra layer of protection. And I'm not saying that it's foolproof, of course, but that is one thing that can help with tearing. And then, of course, the other thing to help with tearing is, again, to really treat the lichen sclerosus, to get the inflammation under control, because when you get the inflammation under control, the tearing and issues will kind of settle. And just a kind of quick remark is that if you do experience recurring tearing, that's definitely something that you would want to bring to a specialist, because there are surgeries for recurrent tearing that they can do to help. For folks that really just nonstop tearing in the same area. So there are things to help with that. So those are some kind of tips to kind of help prevent tearing. So let's talk about how to prepare the body for sex when you have lichen sclerosus, or penetrative sex when you have lichen sclerosus. So what would you suggest if someone, or like, let's say I am new to this and I came to you and I was like, Celina, I feel like I feel ready, but like I'm super nervous and I don't know what to do. Like, what are some tips to kind of ease the nerves and get me ready?
Yeah. Excuse me. And this is a great question for anybody actually with or without LS, right?
I agree.
Yeah. And so as I stated earlier, I have been a like masturbating queen forever. And so I always feel like before doing something, you know, if we are comfortable with ourselves to do this, before we do something that we might be curious about or new to or a little bit worried about with a partner, it's kind of nice to get a little look at, a little feel for on our own. You know, so any new touches in areas that you haven't touched before or in ways, I like to make some intentional time to do that on my own first. If that's, you know, and again, that kind of can be a whole other set of questions, because some folks like that's harder than, you know.
Yeah, for sure. And, you know, maybe we'll do another follow-up video on this.
Yeah, I was going to say, for so many other reasons, right? But if that's possible, and I'd say, you know, really the touches in the areas that you're unsure of, because you want to feel it, like we said before, in the communication with a partner happening before, kind of knowing before you go into something, if this is an area that feels too tender right now, if this is an area that's actually feeling better than you thought it would, you know, some touches, manual touches, or you can use toys, pleasure tools to find that out. Again, I think you bringing up the like using Vaseline or Aquaphor and then the lube with a partner, but also on your own too, is really important. So, you know, kind of before you go into it, what amount you might need, what feels comfortable, what feels like just, you know, kind of doing that Goldilocks thing. Like, this isn't enough. This is too much. This is just right. You can say that about, you know, about the lube or the ointment we're using. We could say that about maybe toys and tools we might be using. And then we can kind of feel better prepared to communicate that when it is time for, if what we want is penetration and we know it's been a little bit difficult, well, we can say like, I'm going to hold up some tools right now. I actually didn't bring, I don't have any dildos close by. I hope Instagram doesn't get mad I said the word. But kind of like looking at sizes and shapes of things, like this felt good, this didn't. So like I have 2 examples of like this made by the same company. So
awesome.
These are Gaia. They're actually biodegradable. Yay, Earth. But I know, great, right? But kind of playing around with different things and then knowing, okay, this felt good laying against this side of my vulva. It didn't feel good on this side. You know, oh, somebody has it.
That's awesome.
You know, this felt good on top of my clitoral hood today, and then this it didn't really feel so great to insert, or it felt okay to insert about, you know, this much, or it felt good to play around this way, you know, circling the vaginal opening but not going in. If we can't practice with some touch, so that we, again, it's a lot of this mental, right? Like, so that we can feel confident and just a little bit more comfortable about what we are going to say yes or no to, and that we can direct it. And then also so we can like literally physically know if our body is in condition for that type of play and pleasure on that day, you know? Yeah, does that
That's fantastic. Yes, I love that. And I think that's so great. And it kind of ties into what you were saying initially with the communication piece. So, it's like explore your body a bit, see where you at today. Because again, lichen sclerosis or not, we're different. Like, I have lichen sclerosis and some days, everything feels great. And other days I'm like, oh, that area, not having it today. Okay. And like, that's normal. Our bodies fluctuate. So I think kind of doing a check-in with yourself, a check-in with your body, touch of some sort, like you said, whether that's with your hands or with a toy, get to see where you're at and then communicate that properly with your partner or partners and say, here's where I'm at. This is a hard no. This is a absolutely heck yes. And this is like a move with caution. Mm-hmm. We're going to move slowly and we're going to kind of check in.
Right. And actually, as you're saying that, I'm thinking, if folks are familiar, but I could just like very briefly with yes, no, maybe charts.
Yeah.
That are typically folks in the kink world. I think I paused again. Sorry. Folks in the kink world are usually familiar with these charts, but it's kind of exactly what you just said, where you've got, if you imagine 3 columns, yes, no, maybe, right? And so almost that could be kind of overall, like in general, this is what I'm into and I'm yes about it. This is what's no for whatever reasons. LS might be one of them. And this is maybe. And with LS, maybe what you're always going to is looking at that maybe column and checking in for the day. Like, all right, this is going to move over here today, or boom, let's try this today because I'm feeling great about I'm feeling great about my clitoral hood today. Pull it back, move it from the maybe, let's go yes, and let's try that. And so kind of having that check-in is great. And for solo sex too, not just with a partner, but like kind of that morning check-in. I'm totally a like wake up in the morning, set my alarm 20 minutes early so that I can take care of me first. And sometimes that's just a check-in, like, all right, well, I'm feeling like this today, I'm not feeling like that. I probably won't do this kind of masturbation later on today, just not feeling it, but I make time to check it out first. And that could be a good little prep tool for us.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I love that you set an alarm. That's so beautiful.
It comes from necessity because there's been too many times in my life, I'd say, some years ago where I just didn't make it to things on time. And and my good friends knew why, and I got tired of that. So
that's awesome. Those are the good friends you keep.
Oh yeah, I've got great friends, right? Like the friends that know why you're actually late, like the real reason why you're late. So
Amen. Freaking men. So kind of talking about hands and toys, let's maybe talk a bit about some alternatives to penetration, because sometimes your lichen sclerosis might be too active and penetration is just a no-go. That certainly was for me. I actually took penetrative sex off the table for like almost a year because my symptoms were just so bad. And I was like, you know what? I just need to take a step back and do something else. And penetration is just not going to happen. So maybe let's talk about some other ways that we can incorporate intimacy and pleasure into our relationship with ourselves and into our relationship with others that doesn't involve penetration.
Yay, my favorite thing to talk about. I mean, penetration is great too, but so something I didn't realize about myself, there's all these things that then learning and having these conversations gives us language for. I said I was diagnosed when I was in my early 20s, but I didn't know everything I know until finding you, until finding the podcast, until connecting with groups. And we're talking, that's almost 20 years later, to not have language for what is happening to me, to not know why I don't want to be penetrated, to not, I really have a thing where I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure that that my labia did shrink, but I didn't know that that was a possibility when I was
For
diagnosed.
sure.
No doctor told me that this is what could happen. You know, I just used to think like, gosh, I guess I have a really, really tiny clit. I didn't realize that maybe it's just being covered more. There's all these things that I didn't know about my body literally until 1 to 2 years ago in connecting with community, right?
Right.
I get a little sad about that, you know, not knowing. But what it does help reveal to me is why I've always liked the things I've liked. That was my long way of feeling like, oh, now I kind of know what's always been a hump and grinder. Okay? All my life. Now I understand. So some things, you know, I guess I think I want to move from far away from our actual like genitals and then move in closer. So I think
Cool.
we're talking about pleasure. The way that I teach and kind of like do support and coaching for that is really thinking about, and we could talk forever about this, but delighting our senses. We have 5 senses, right? We've got that like 6th sense, right? But delighting our senses. And so to get ourselves away from totally concentrating on, I can't delight the sense of touch through penetration and then getting like so stuck on it. Say like move away from penetration as far away as you can, right? So, and use your senses for that. So that might be really just like your sense of sight first. What delights your senses? It may be sexual, may not be, right? But I mean, if we're talking really trying to like hit those, you know, sexual sense, you know, sense of delight. For me, and I'm going to be using me as an example because that's the person I know best. I love looking at actually drawings and art, and sometimes even like comics of you know, that kind of make me aroused, and it's like delighting my eyes. Sometimes what I want by delight is like I really want to see pretty things, like whether that be, you know, through a screen, through looking out the window, going outside, or putting something like physically moving a bouquet of flowers in my sight when I'm laying in bed, right? So there's like the sight. The sounds for me are huge. I'm a big like audio person. So I go there too with what kind of sounds do I like? Sometimes it's the sound of just quiet and calm to really get me out of that space of like what I'm not going to get, you know?
Right.
I'm a big fan of audio porn. So I like to listen and kind of do a little thing where I'm like, okay, while I'm listening, I'm going to kind of touch where I hear them touching, but not, you know, those sort of things. I'm going through this, but I mean, we know the rest of our senses. Sense of smell. If a candle does it, think sexual thoughts while there's a pie in the oven. I mean, really being intentional about what you like and letting it delight your senses. I'm saying we're really moving way far away from penetration of the genitals at this point, right? We're not there at all yet. Sense of taste. I cannot tell you how many times I have been super horny, but not feeling healthy in my vulva, and just ordering a cake, ordering chocolate.
I hear you on that.
At 11 o'clock at night, door dashing that thing to me, and sitting there in lingerie, because for me that's like sense of touch that still feels good, right? And I'm providing my senses with that, and I'm enlaced, and I know I'm not going to have solo sex or partnered sex. I'm not putting anything in me except that chocolate cake through my mouth. And I know it's not the same. That's what I'm saying. I don't want to make people feel like, oh, you know, you can't have penetrative sex. Eating chocolate cake and lingerie is just the same. It's not.
Right. It's not, for sure.
It's not. I'm not trying to pretend. But when we think about everything else we can do to still give ourselves pleasure, it's a lot about practicing, whether you have a flare-up or not, whether you're in pain or not. It's a lot about practicing all the other things that might give you pleasure so that you can enjoy them all the time anyway, but also so that you got your own back, you know, when something does upset you because you can't have a specific act that you want. So that's like moving all the way away. That's my like brief like pleasure workshop that I like do.
Right.
But then getting like a little bit more back to our bodies, really back to our bodies, is how can we make other parts of our body, our skin, feel good? And do we know them? And again, it's practice, practice, practice. It's like having your partner touch new places in new ways with new with different sensory feelings. So I have just like a few things here, or doing it yourself. So just like all sorts of things. Get so excited. We were talking about temperature, the type of material we're using. So this is, this right here can be used with temperature play. And yes, it looks very penetrative, right? But if you use something like this and you warm it or you cool it and you see how it feels against different parts of your body, different erogenous zones, play with this on your wrist. Oh my gosh, I can't right now because we're live. But like, play with it on your wrist, your ankles. That was very, very, there you go. You wanted live, everybody.
You're selling me. Look, you're selling me. I'm probably going to be like, what was that thing with the temperature wrist thing I want?
This actually sells. I can name where I get stuff from too. And anybody that wants to DM me can. And I love to share discounts codes because on International Women's Day and every day, we got to help each other out. But something like this that can be really great for temperature play. Like it looks like it's penetrative. Like, why do I have this if I can't put it in me? That's awful. There's so many other things. Like, let me run this across my belly. Let it play with my belly button. What would you want, a penis to do to you outside of your vagina? Well, let's put this here and let's like feel it around. That's like, and it's hard. So that's like something with that kind of sense of touch. Then I'm looking at, this is my favorite, okay? So.
Oh, yes.
Yes. So I said I've been a hump and grinder for a long time. My favorite thing to do with this, it's so squishy, it's so soft, and it can be, it can be used to, like there's room to put a dildo or like strap on. But what I do is I take this little bullet, I'm turning it on. I don't know if you can hear it.
Nope.
Kind of quiet, so that's a good thing, right? It's buzzy, and and as I'm doing this, I'll talk about the differences in sensations. But this is a buzzy toy. That means it's like, if you think of buzzy, say the word buzzy, like buzz, like that's the sensation it's giving your body, right? It can be a little muted, and that can be kind of hard for us sometimes. With everybody has their own preference, but for me, when I'm having something not feel great down there, buzzy doesn't feel so. It's not my preference. But I put this fuzzy toy, this little bullet, I put it in here, right? I lay on top of this, and I can just like grind away at my own pace. It's like, it's giving me this like it's like doled it out, but there's texture, and that feels so nice. That's kind of a way to play with. I know that's not beyond the genitals. That's like getting closer to it. But that's a way to play with texture. This pinwheel.
Oh, I love.
When we are people who experience a lot of pain that is not desired, there is something really, I'd say, almost euphoric and just like it's like very emotional about giving myself very consensual, chosen, not this doesn't feel actually painful to me, but like, something that's not soft, something that's not, that's like, kind of gives you a little like, ooh, but knowing that I chose it, it's freaking empowering, feels good on different parts of my skin. This is something that is fun for a partner to play with because they can access so many different parts of my body in a different way and find out how this feels. Thighs, again, wrists, back of neck, and my like face. And I can do this with myself or with a partner. And I think it's a lot about like having this like choice of having this different feeling can be thrilling. You know, that can be thrilling.
Absolutely.
So, and then I'm going to go and just like pull out a wand, because I think this
You have to.
an you know, this could be like any vulva owner, but definitely an LS survivor's best friend. And I'm going to put it on, and I'm going to, again, now I told you about Buzzy, right? This was like a Buzzy toy. I have another Buzzy toy that I was going to put on, because so you could actually like see how, I mean, it's.
Oh, I can hear that.
Yeah, it's pretty Buzzy. Turn off, please. Okay. This is a rumbly toy. A wand is pretty rumbly, and you're getting such broad distribution that for us, it's a magic tool. And there's so many different wands. You find the ones that you like. I know, like, you never go wrong with, you know, the original, but these are kind of a couple others. This is La Wand, and this is Ollie. This actually glows in the dark by Unbound.
Ooh,
so fun.
That's cool.
Like, so fun. But we're talking like broad and rumbly. And this you can use everywhere, right? Everywhere.
And you also don't have to put it like directly on the clitoris either, which is nice. So if you're someone that tends to tear around there,
exactly.
like, you know, you could put it more towards the base, but our clitoris is more than what we just see, right? Like, it's actually a lot bigger. I used to always think it was just that little teeny thing.
Right. Here, sorry. I had to plug in my I'm a mess this morning. I plugged in my phone because it was going to die, and now I'm holding it, but showing everybody, like, here's the model of our vulva, right? And going to, let's see if I can, what we're talking about with the clitoris, what you were just saying is, here's the entire giant, it's so big on the inside of us. But this is what our clitoris looks like you know, the entire thing internally. So if I put this in here, what we're going to see is, this is the part that's visible. All of this is where we have nerve endings too. All these like nerves all through here. So what that means is, if we are stimulating, let's use this wand. If we are stimulating in kind of a deeper pressure way here, look what you're really like getting to. You know, we're getting to this, and where we feel like, and then here's the vaginal opening. No wonder if we're not feeling so great there, we're not trying to, you know, do this. That might feel great. But when you look through here, when we're talking about like what we actually stimulate internally, all of that is like trying to get to the back of this too. So there's other ways to do it, and we don't knock them, right? So you can definitely guide around here. More, like I said, when I was using this becomes, oh look, they're friends. This becomes kind of like a nice squishy, soft, like kind way to stimulate an area that might be feeling extra irritated, but you're giving some barrier to that. So having tools, I always say, I have tools. I have tools for this, you know, for pleasure in general, but definitely when we're thinking about LS or any, like, I have chronic yeast infections and UTIs, and just like all at once could happen. So for me, I feel like I need a whole toolbox, because I don't know what's coming. There was one thing that I wanted to, so when we're talking erogenous zones, and I think you've seen this for me, I feel very fortunate that I can have nipple orgasms away from my genitals. I'm not going to pretend, this does make me feel like a superhero. Like, I want a cape. It feels really, like, I feel really great. Even if you're a person that can't, like, that hasn't experienced an orgasm, our breasts and our nipples are another, like, such great place for pleasure without going anywhere near an LS flare in our genitals, right? So some things that, I saw somebody had a question about clit suckers, as that kind of tool, like that kind of pressure, and how that could feel, and if that could feel good. If you're having a flare up there, if the skin is, hardened there, there's a tear there, you know, it might be an area you're trying to avoid, and these can be very powerful tools. So, you know, I'd say before you try it on your clit, you're going to want to feel what that feels like somewhere else, you know. So this is another, I love this guy. It's like the most, or gal, I don't know. No, this is my non-binary friend.
Oh,
I'm
there we
so
go.
sorry.
Yay.
I told you these toys are strong. I'm just kidding.
Did you break the phone with the toy?
I did not break the phone with my toy, but just, I don't know what happened there, but I'm sorry.
That's so
lost
funny.
Connection that way. And I know that we'll probably have to get to a place where we can, I realize the time where we can end for folks too. I did want to, what I was saying, just to not interrupt that, was that what's great if you're going to find a toy like this, like a clit sucker toy, or what it's actually doing is using air pressure. So there's some toys that are using actual sucking, but then some that it's just like, it's air that's being out.
Right. That's what I heard. It's like a pulse of air.
Yes, it's a pulse of air. And so I don't want folks to get too, like, when I recommend them, I'm like, don't get too scared by the name, like it's gonna suck, you know. Or
I think that's what I thought. It was just gonna, like, you know, rip it off of me.
So that's what I'm trying to see if I can. It's hard. You can't see all the way inside this to see what's happening mechanically inside. I wish that you could, because it's like, it's this really cool. Okay, wait. If I turn it off, okay, you see it's off. Okay, it's off now. Okay, now I'm going to turn it on to the first speed, or like, you know, pressure. And you're going to start see that is happening because it's like, it's flittering. You know, it's pushing out air. And this is a nice one because it doesn't come on too strong right away. It can get there and you can kind of hear it.
Yep, that's so neat.
Now, if I start here, I'm done in 2 seconds. This is just, it's also, to me, if I don't want a quick orgasm, I can't play with this. Like,
right. I've heard that. I have heard that, like, you're done for.
It's that good. But it's nice if you have something that has like this gradual setting. And again, play with it somewhere else. Play with it on your nose first. Check it out. But again, this is really good for nipples, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Nipples. And anything you can do, you know, any toy you have, you could play with your breasts, like, pretty much. It's all there for you. A little tip also, while we're on my favorite subject of toys, and I learned this way long time ago when I was like probably like 19 years old. I'm in San Francisco, and I have the great fortune of being near like in the city that Good Vibrations store was founded. And like, you know, as soon as I turned 18, I was like, hi, I'm here, teach me everything. I've been waiting. And something I learned from them way early on was that the way to test like the pressure and feeling and all that of a toy, and vibrating toy, is to test it on your nose. Have you ever heard this?
No. I feel like it would make me sneeze.
Yeah, it's kind of funny, but because just like, see, and this is why Buzzy, I'm not with it today.
Also, you know, I'm going to do this after this live. Like, before I make lunch, I'm going to stick I'm going to play with my toys and see what it feels like.
Turn sideways so you can see, like, right here. And if you think about it, like, feel the, you know, kind of feel what your nose feels like right here. It's not like hard.
Right.
You know, it's not like squishy like your cheek. There's, you know, there's some give. And when you think about parts of our vulva, there's some give. You know, there's, you know, this is like a vulva that wouldn't be irritated, just like a nose that wouldn't be irritated. Now imagine if your nose was sunburned, and this is not what they taught me at Good Vibrations, but what I've figured out over time with everything I have. So let's say this toy feels really cool when I'm using it right now. And then I go sit out in the sun and my son gets sunburned, or my nose gets sunburned. I try it. It's not the one. You know, that's not working. Not saying that we go get our noses sunburned, but you can kind of get an idea of like, okay, we treat our bodies, we treat the other parts of our bodies that are not seen, they're not secret, and we can treat them kindly as we would any part that would be seen, right? But that is the trick. You can test the power of vibration. You could test the kind of vibration. Again, I said like between the difference between buzzy and rumbly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then also, I'd say pinpointed. So this is kind of a fun little one.
Yeah, I've seen those. Yeah.
You know, and this is flexible, but pinpointed because we're like going to a certain place. I think also a toy like this where you can be pinpointed this way
Mm-hmm.
or broad this way, right?
Yep.
So when you're testing it on your nose or other parts of your body, those are a couple of, like, I'd say quick tricks and tips of the trade to, you could see what feels better, the rumbly, the buzzy, pinpointed or broad, and then carry that through other different parts of your body and play that little game with yourself.
I love that.
Have somebody do that with you and really, you know, really make, I have like a quick I do have a friend who is like super into spreadsheets and, you know, everything is labeled and organized. And I've suggested this, and she says that she actually has a spreadsheet that her and her partner have created together with like touch and toys and categorized. And she's like, and it's kind of a fun thing for us because now like they just went super nerdy on it, and it's just been built into part of their practice is like to do this fun categorization of touch, which is cool.
Yeah, I love that. The inner nerd in me is like, how have I not thought about this? That's great. I love it. And you know, I think one of the things, like I love everything that you just said so much, because I think what I really enjoyed about the kind of moving away and then moving back inwards is it's almost like we're reprogramming and relearning what pleasure means for me. Because I think that a lot of us have, when we think about pleasure, it's been dictated by what society says. So like pleasure for somebody with a vulva and vagina is penetrative sex with a penis. And I think that like we have a lot of these ingrained narratives in our head. And I think the moving away kind of allows us to explore for ourselves and to reclaim that for ourselves, and to like really, I think it's a beautiful moment to really connect with yourself. And then, yeah, like you said, then bring partners into that. They're also going to learn so much, and you can do that with them too. Like, person doesn't need to have LS to do any of that.
Exactly. And I think if we're on this International Women's Day, happy International Women's Day too. I think something that I think about, you know, that I feel like has made me that LS and all the other down there issues I've had, what it also makes me really sensitive to, not just with women or people with vulvas, but like really feeling like I'm more also empathetic to people with penises that they have their own things going on, right?
For sure.
And I hope that I am a person and I am a partner that they feel like they can share openly with too. And that can be really hard. I mean, you know, that's a completely other subject, you know, but the stigma for folks with penises about how they're supposed to pleasure someone, how they are supposed to perform, these sort of things. And when that is a problem for whatever reasons they're going through, that's hard for them to communicate too, you know? So creating a space where pleasure is not, like you said, completely focused on P and V penetration is good for everybody. It's good for whatever, you know, whatever gender folks you are spending time with. It's good for your solo sex. It's good for your partner when they're separate away from you, that they know they can do this on their own, and it doesn't feel like they are, you know, we have folks that do feel like, oh, pleasure on my own is not being loyal to my partner. I mean, when we have all of this like away from our body pleasure and then bringing it in, this is good for everybody. And we're like setting up a space where our partners, whatever, you know, genitals they have, can feel safer with us and can feel safer about expressing what kind of pleasure they want, they need, they're curious about, and what they've been told is wrong. All of that, like doing those, you know, and I like using the word pleasure. Like, and I have children, and I do a whole piece on use the word pleasure with kids when they're young, because by the time they are, you know, they get older, we don't want pleasure to be a naughty word, unless except for the times where we want it to feel naughty, you know.
Sure.
But we don't want that stigma with pleasure. And how do we start that? It's by saying, you know, if a kid is eating a cupcake at a birthday party and you come home and you say, oh my gosh, did you love that cupcake? That cupcake gave me so much pleasure to eat. It was so good. In little ways, you know, oh, you're watching baseball. Oh, baseball is one of my favorite pleasures. So we're using the word pleasure in a really positive way as early as we can, as often as we can, so that when it comes time to talking about what kind of pleasure can we have that is not penis and vagina, we are more comfortable for ourselves, and we're making a space that feels more comfortable for the people we're talking about it with.
And, I love that. Good on you for having those conversations with your kids. That's fantastic. And I think like one of the things that I feel like you were saying, this benefits everybody. It's not just to our benefit, like it benefits your partners as well to have these kinds of play and explorations, but also just when we get rid of those expectations about how our bodies should be, how they should look like, how they should function, it's really, really freeing. And I think like we got a lot of questions about like libido. How do I get in the mood? I don't have libido, or I have like no more libido. And I think, you know, in part that's due to the pain and the symptoms. But I think another part of the low libido is those expectations. Like I'm expected as, you know, someone with a vagina that you should just stick something in me and it works. And when it doesn't, I get really upset, and that in turn starts to lower my libido. But if we kind of shed those narratives and just kind of bring it back to basics and explore and play with pleasure in the way that you're saying, it really just, it gives us this new space and this new opportunity to be like, F what all of you say. I'm going to define pleasure for me, myself, my body, my partner or partners. We're going to define what pleasure means for us. And again, you know, these are always going to change. You know, our pleasures, our likes, our dislike, it changes in time. And I think that's why it's nice to kind of go back to what you were saying at the beginning of the importance of communication before and then that debriefing after. So, you know, oh, we tried this new toy. How did you feel about it? How did you feel about it? You know, we have conversations about that. And then we can grow and evolve together as our concept of pleasure evolves, because, you know, maybe you tried something new and now you're like, oh my Lord, where has this been my whole life? How did I never know that this was a pleasure area on my body? And now I want it all the time. Like, great. Now tell your partner that, because they'll probably be excited. Like, again, a healthy relationship, or, you know, the person wants to provide you with pleasure. So like if you tell them like, hey, this really gives me a lot of pleasure, they're probably going to be excited. They're going to be like, awesome, I will do this for you. Yay. And again, like it doesn't have to be genital, which is nice, you know, and maybe sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. Like, oh, I'm flaring today, so we're going to go back to, you know, these things are on the table and these aren't. Cool. And then,
remember,
you know, I am very intrigued by that. And I'm wondering if maybe we could like, if you could write down like your discount codes, like when I post this in the chat, or any links that you have in the chat, in the comment section, but maybe also if you want to make like a doc, I could put that in the link in my bio, and kind of, so if anyone is interested in any of these products, then they could go use your discount code for them, because I'm very intrigued by that temperature.
This is from Unbound, and I'll say you know, there's so many different companies that I really like, but a lot of the toys I just pulled up were from Unbound, and I love them because they everything's just so safe, and everything is, they've got a sense of humor, the company does, and I'm like,
and that's important too.
I'm like, I've got a whole lot going on with me that, you know, I need a little sense of humor about what I need to feel pleasure. So and I will say that I know where we really are getting to need to be the end of this, but something you and I have kind of touched on, and I want to just make sure that I will put in the comments too that I am available for this. You know, I went through I told you I was like masturbating queen from the time I was very, very young. And I'm talking like a kid. I knew what I was doing and I was like, figured it out. And and then to go from that person to being in a sexless marriage, and not just because of UTIs, yeast, and pelvic health, not just because of that, but like a lot of mental and emotional abuse. To go from this person who was like very sexual in my nature to a sexless marriage and thinking like, and I stopped doing any solo sex too. Couple that with my physical, you know, woes. I went from this like super sexual in touch person to feeling like, oh, it's okay if I never masturbate. It's okay if I never orgasm again. I don't think it's a big deal anymore, and went like a couple years without it. When I separated and divorced, it was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. I took this away from myself, and that I felt like it was not a necessary part of my identity. And I actually went to my mom and I said, well, it's okay. We haven't had sex and I haven't had sex and I don't do this anymore, but it's okay. I mean, there's there's so much more to me. I'm a mom now. I'm this, I'm that. And she almost teary-eyed said to me, she's like, and you're human, and you are a sexual person, and don't let that part of your identity mean less than something else. You can be a mom and feel like you want to have sex, and like those things are all important. So when I have this like treasure trove of toys, part of that for me, and I said all this piece, was to say that I needed something outside of me, outside of my own hands, because I lost that, I lost it, and I didn't have it in a partner anymore. And I found this first company I found, Unbound, was speaking to me, because it was like woman to woman, like, hey, you want to figure out what feels good again? Let's talk about it. And so that's what I feel like I do with people now, because it took me trying these other things to remember what pleasure was like, and really being intentional with it. Like I had to train myself to want to feel good, because I'd been living with being just satisfied with this. So I had to train myself to want to feel good. And that's like part of what I do with folks now. It's like I started this like pleasure support, which that turned to a lot of people going through divorce reaching out to me and saying, can you help me with this part of divorce too? Can you help me with that part? And it always comes down to this core of how can we prioritize pleasure? How can we remove some roadblocks to seeking joy? And how do we make sure that, moving forward, you deserve that? And if we got to train ourselves to want pleasure again, if we got to train ourselves to believe we deserve it again, that's the work I do. And so I help people talk to their kids still about sex, because that's super fun. I'm a support to people going through any of the downstairs issues, but really at the core of everything. And I can always offer this as my like passion service, is that folks that need support, remembering that they deserve it, and actual like tools and ritual for practicing it, I'm here. So
I love that. And I think that would be really helpful and important for a lot of folks with lichen sclerosus, because I do think they, it's not a divorce scenario per se. I mean, some of them may have that as well, but I think that, when you go through chronic pain and chronic issues down there for so long, there can be this complete blocking off, such that you do really need an extra helping hand to help, like you said, kind of retrain yourself. It's like an intentional act. It takes effort. And I think that if that's something that you're not accustomed to doing, sometimes it can be really helpful to have somebody to kind of walk with you on that journey until you're kind of ready to walk off on your own. Because of course that's the goal, right? To just completely empower themselves and, know that if you have lichen sclerosus, you deserve pleasure too. And just because you might not have pleasure the way society says you're supposed to have pleasure, doesn't mean you can't, doesn't mean you don't deserve it. And So I love that you offer that
Absolutely.
service.
No,
I think that's fantastic.
it's all in one, you know. That's why I said, like, no matter what I do, it's all to the same core. Like, part of having a sexless marriage, part of not having sex was like, it was the LS. It was, I had surgeries, you know, I had all different kinds of stuff going on. And you really start thinking that maybe you're just a person with a body that doesn't need pleasure. Like, I've got all these other things. It's okay. I don't
I
need
hear that all the
pleasure.
time.
Like, I've got children. I've got a great job. I've got this, like, as if one, you know, serves for the other, and it's not. And so it is. It's a big deal for us to be able to say, folks with LS or any other, you know, disease or condition, like, I deserve pleasure too. I just might need to take a little extra to figure out how to do that again.
Yeah. And again, coming back to that, moving away from the genitals initially and kind of just reconnecting with what pleasure means to you. I mean, I think that actually a lot of folks are disconnected from their concept of pleasure because we live in such a hyper fast world, a world in which things are flying at us constantly and we're doing tons of things. It's like sometimes, you know, I go through my day and I'm like, man, I didn't mindfully go through a second of any of that. Like, I don't even remember eating my lunch, or like, did I take a moment to like appreciate the taste in my mouth?
I'm going to give you this, like, now Jaclyn's getting an assignment before we go. I want you to, because what you just said, like, I'm thinking about, I'll get my coffee and I go through like the drive-through to get it, or I go and it's like so fast and I'm getting it because it's routine and I'm like going, right? Do you drink tea or coffee?
I drink tea.
You drink tea, okay. And probably just like routinely, like, this is what I make my cup of tea. Yeah. So later on today or tomorrow, the next time you have tea, I want you to block out like 10 minutes before you make your tea. And, you know, when you're drinking your tea, like, don't do anything else but drink your tea. That's super hard.
I was just going to say, I'm like, ooh, getting anxious.
I know. That's super hard because, or at least for like 10 minutes, 5 minutes,
yeah.
5 minutes, 5 minutes of drinking your tea and not doing anything else. Because part of like being able to seek pleasure and prioritize it and be intentional about it is that sometimes we do things that give us pleasure, but we're just like sneaking them in between like these other things or at the same time. And so we're not actually feeling and knowing why it gives us pleasure, right? So just that cup of tea, 10 minutes before you make it, put yourself in a space where you can notice, like what I said before, the 5 senses. You're going to be prepared to delight your sense of taste, your sense of smell, your sense of touch with the warmth, but put yourself in a space where you like what you see too. So you can delight your sense of sight, right? Do that, whether it's like watching something for 10 minutes that you know, a show you want to watch, if it's like being outside, if it's being in a room looking at something you really like in your home, whatever. Prepare yourself to delight your senses, have that cup of tea, and for 5 minutes, don't do anything else on top of it, so that while you're drinking the tea, you can really feel it going down your throat. You can, you know, think about what parts of your body it's activating. You can like swirl it on your tongue. I mean, there's so many things that, like, as I'm saying this, it sounds sexual because really when we're talking about like sexual pleasure, it's coming from this place of just like really
pure
what
pleasure.
Feels good.
Yeah.
So when you're drinking that tea, play with it, hold the mug, really pay attention to all of the delights you have, and let that just be that. You know, if you give yourself 15 minutes with your tea, that's your assignment. You know,
I love that. I will do that. I think it's this kind of beautiful, like, intentional embodiment, this come back into your body kind of moment, because I do think there's, like, for many folks, a lot of disconnect between the body and then that more cerebral up here, just caught in the busyness of the day to day. So I think that's like a nice kind of way to close, is just remember, like, you know, to reconnect with pleasure and relearn your body. And if you have lichen sclerosus, you deserve pleasure too. This disease does not mean that you can't have pleasure or that you don't deserve pleasure. You deserve pleasure.
Yes.
So thank you so much.
We both do. We all do.
Yes, everyone does, including us.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've learned so much. You're just like a fountain of wisdom, and I appreciate you so much. We're gonna get this live up soon, and then we'll leave your comments. You can put all of your links there, and then we'll also have like a doc that I will put in my link in bio. So if anyone wants to go get these toys, you can go check that out.
Great.
All right. Bye, everyone.
Take care.
Bye.
All right, so that wraps up this video. I hope you learned some new information. I hope you feel more empowered. I hope you have some strategies now for moving forward with some of the things that you were struggling with. Once again, if you want to work with Celina, I will have her information in the description box below. So please check that out. Please go give her a follow over on Instagram, and also please stay tuned because we have some exciting videos and content coming your way around the topic of sexual health, sexuality, and lichen sclerosus. All right, that is it for this one. I will catch you in the next one.